Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this Thursday morning webinar series. I am Chloe Tetro, the coaching lead here with Ready Care. For today, we're going to look at the wild and wonderful world of reaction to intention, creating better days at work. So essentially, it's looking at how we start and how we respond to our day, shaping the results of our day and our experience of the day. So how can we really kind of bring a little bit more attention around that for ourselves and the greater impact at large that our responses versus impulses will bring us. So I suppose starting off, imagine two very, very different mornings. In one, you're jolting awake by your alarm, you grab your phone. I mean, maybe I compound that. I said grab my phone, but it's right next to me as I said that. So you jolt awake, grab your phone, start doom scrolling. You're looking at emails, you're looking at news, work messages. You're starting to get a little bit panicked. You see a disappointing headline. Before you've even fully arrived into your day, your stress response starts. You start to go into what's known as autopilot mode. It's totally taken over. So we look at how that can derail the day in a little bit, but checking an alternative scenario. So in this alternative, lovely, slip dimension, you wake a few little minutes earlier, you take a few calming breaths, you're landing into your day, you're letting your eyes adjust to the light, you stretch, maybe take a little moment of quietness, have a glass of water. But most importantly, you set a small intention for your day. You might even jot it down. You might even then reach for your phone and tap it into your phone. So how do you want to show up today? What is it that's most important for you to accomplish that day? So you feel focused, you feel purposeful, and you're landed into your body. So these two mornings have very different flavors. If you try those on, close your eyes and get into what each of these feel like. I mean, they're both fairly familiar, I'm sure, for everybody out there, but they feel very differently. Our bodies respond very differently. Our mind responds very differently to these. And as research and experience shows, that flavor can linger all through your day. So the way that we start and respond to each day truly shapes everything that unfolds thereafter. It will affect our mood, our focus, our stress levels, and our overall effectiveness. So that's what we'll really have a look at today. We're going to explore why that is using a few little insights from neuroscience, psychology, and behavioral science. We look at how our brains form our habits that put us in that reactive autopilot mode and what the cognitive and emotional costs really of that autopilot can be. So more importantly, we'll have a look at practical, evidence-based techniques to shift into a more intentional and purposeful state. So even if you're busy and juggling 1,000 things. So the session is really to look to anchor in a friendly, digestible and energizing sort of way that'll consider designing your mornings. So science of habits, why it is that we operate on autopilot. So to understand our morning behavior, we first need to understand habits and autopilot. So if you've ever driven to work and later realized you remember almost nothing about the drive, that is a prime example of autopilot. Or found yourself checking emails without thinking, opening Instagram in my case, unfortunately, or clicking between tabs on the computer and going, wait a minute now, what am I doing? How did I get here? So habits form the backbone of autopilot behavior. Studies by psychologist Wendy Wood found that almost 45% of our daily actions are actually done while we're thinking about something else. Great. So in other words, nearly half of what we do every day, we do out of habit, not out of conscious choice. So our brains embrace habits because they're efficient. They free up lots more mental energy by automating frequent tasks. Kind of like, I suppose we all set out to do with the tasks that we do most often in the day. Is there a way to automate that? Can I be staring off into space instead? So how do habits form in the brain? Through repetition. Repetition and neural wiring. When you repeat an action over and over in a consistent context, so checking your phone each morning as you sip coffee, right? So you have two things happening there. your brain will gradually shift the control of that behavior from your conscious mind to a deeper automatic center. So neuroscientists have shown that as a new behavior is practiced repeatedly, control moves from the prefrontal cortex, so the brain's planning and decision center, to the basal ganglia, the habit center. Think of it like laying down a path in a field by walking the same route every day. Eventually, it starts to form a clearing in the path. So in the brain, this trail is a neural pathway. So it becomes stronger and much, much efficient and faster with repetition. So over time, the behavior becomes almost reflexive. You don't need to think about it, you just do it. So that's very, very helpful for things like routines, if you're automatically locking the door after yourself. So there's a writer that said a little quip along the lines of, by repeating the actions over and over, they become automatic until one day you don't have to remember to brush your teeth, you just do it, right? So it's lodged in, essentially. So Daniel Kahneman, who wrote that brilliant book, Thinking Fast, Thinking Slower, Thinking Slow, Thinking Fast, one or the other, he provided a really, really helpful framework for all of this. So he describes our thinking as having two basic modes. There's the system one, which is your fast, automatic, habitual autopilot, and system two, which is slow, effortful, deliberate. It's more like our intentional self, for want of a better word. So system one is what kicks in when you follow a habit or a gut instinct. It's intuitive, it operates with little effort, whereas system two is what we use when we stop and think, when we plan, when we solve a particular tough problem. So in the morning, system one might have you blindly going through your routine, doing the same things over and over, while your mind is doing something else. Might be thinking about the episode of White Lotus that you watched last night. So it's efficient. You could do these things in your sleep, essentially, practically in the day to day. You don't have to put any thought into doing these particular things. But the intentional system two, is what we engage when we decide to start a new habit or focus on a specific goal for the day. So it turns out that we all have this dynamic of an intentional self and a habitual self. Our intentional self is guided by things that are important to us. So our goals, our values, our memories, moments in our lives that have shaped who we are. The parts that of you that wants to exercise in the morning or thoughtfully plan the week ahead in a schedule. But then the habitual self is cued by context, right? Remember the cigarette and coffee, or phone and coffee, I think was the example, and past repetitions. So it's built off of those things. So the part that might automatically reach for a scone at work because it's on the counter and you used to do that all the time, and you love previously having chats with the scone on the counter with your coworkers. So even though you might not intend to do it, the habitual self is going, this is what we usually do, bam. So Wendy Wood refers to the habitual self as a default window that wins out when we lack energy or attention. It's like the program that runs when the pilot, your conscious mind, will take a break. So habits in themselves obviously are not bad. That is not what I'm trying to put out here. They're a normal function of a healthy brain, and they're meant to help us handle familiar tasks with greater ease, right? As Wood notes, habits are the default response in a familiar context. They're automatic, easy, efficient, fast, happy days. The automatic aspect of it is great when the habits are beneficial, but if our habits are misaligned with what it is that we want long term, if we never really come off of autopilot when we're in new situations, for example, that's when problems can creep in. So let's look at what can go wrong when we operate just on autopilot, especially in the morning. So when we start our day in that reactive autopilot, we basically surrender our morning, and often our whole day actually, to external triggers and ingrained patterns. So remember, The automatic aspect is all about the context it's operating in and its already wired patterns. So this can carry quite a lot of cognitive and emotional cost, actually. So one major issue is that autopilot often means that our mind is not fully present, right? We might be going through the motions, showering, getting in the car, doing our emails, but mentally we're either half asleep or we're worrying already about the next thing that's going to come up in our day. So Harvard psychologist Matthew Killingsworth and Daniel Gilbert famously showed that people's minds wander nearly 47% of the time. And crucially, a wandering mind, as the Buddhists and the sages have said all through the ages, a wandering mind is not a happy mind. So in the study, people were less happy when their attention was off in daydreams and distractions compared to when they were present in the moment. And I suppose that's why so much of our human philosophy is about getting us back into the now, right? Get into that moment, into inhabiting where you presently are. Regardless of what they were doing, they felt a little bit less happy if they weren't present. So in other words, if you're eating on autopilot when mentally you're replaying yesterday's meeting, you're likely enjoying both the breakfast, your thoughts. Well, actually, that's not both. That's throat. Three things: the breakfast, your thoughts, and your morning, right? Zooming out, you're probably enjoying those a lot less, right? So over time, living in this half present state can chip away at your overall well-being. It's hard to feel fulfilled or content if almost half of your waking life is spent checking out or ruminating. It's also exhausting. So operating on autopilot can undermine our productivity and our mental sharpness. When you start the day in a reactive flurry, immediately answering messages, clicking every notification, multitasking between 10 different things, doom scrolling, bam, 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 your brain gets pulled in many directions. And multitasking or rapid task switching dramatically reduces efficiency and increases errors. So our brains incur what's called a switching cost each time we jump focus. So if you've ever been really, really caught in, something that requires a lot of attention, coworker says something to you, say something back. It was an important question, to be fair to them, blah, 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 blah. You're back in, and it's going to take you another little while to get back into the task that you were doing. If that keeps happening continuously over and over and over, the switching cost essentially means that 40%, up to 40%, of your time shifting tasks and being in those blocks will be trying to get back into the task, which is massive. That's nearly half. So think about that. You could lose almost half of your productivity just by trying to do too many things at once or by constantly reacting to interruptions. If your morning routine involves immediately diving into reaction mode, you might be depleting your mental energy, through constant context switching. Because remember, automatic pilot reacts to context, right? Without you even trying. Context, react. And that takes energy each time. It's taking you away from what you actually want to do. And that starts to affect us, right? So what happens? We start to get stressed. We get heightened stress response because our autopilot system is tied to survival circuits, right? That fight or flight response in the amygdala, it tends to treat any trigger as urgent until proven otherwise. So a minor work email saying, please call me, and if I received that 7 a.m., please call me, that would absolutely send me into a spiral, but maybe other people it wouldn't do that too. So it can send this kind of jolt of anxiety throughout the body that if it were a kind of a threat, a monster coming for you, which it feels like that sometimes, it would make a lot more sense. But our stress response is activated right off the bat. So researcher called Gleb, I'm going to try and say his second name here, Tsipursky. Yes, Tsipursky. So he was writing on the autopilot versus intelligent, that our autopilot, so our system one, will react to small modern stresses as if they're these major threats, right? They lead to unnecessarily stressful everyday life, which I'm sure is something that we can recognize as a mirror, or maybe not. So over time, Consistently starting the day in a tense reactive state contributes to chronic stress, and chronic stress, well, we know the downsides associated with that. It erodes concentration and impairs our memory. It elevates our cortisol and beyond the healthy levels that we need it for. Chronic stress will literally push the brain further into habit mode because it's essentially going, oh, I can't deal with this, more into habit mode. So studies have found that under stress, mice defaulted to repetitive habitual actions instead of adapting to new information. They kept pressing a lever for food even when they were no longer hungry, whereas unstressed mice don't really do that. Now, are we mice? Can we say, okay, it happened with them, is it happening with us? Well, largely, I mean, looking around at our lives, there's quite a lot of anecdotal evidence, at least, to show that, yes, in a high stress environment, we have a tendency to try to make our world a little bit smaller, because basically our window of tolerance starts to get lower and lower and lower, and everything outside of that becomes a little bit too much. So it emotionally activates and sets quite a negative tone for the whole day. If you think of mood as something that has momentum, if your day begins with chaos or a sense of, oh God, I'm already behind, that feeling can snowball. Psychologically, this is related to a phenomenon called the cognitive bias. So basically, early events color our interpretation of later events. If your morning starts poorly, we might interpret what are neutral events, like meh, gray zone events, in a more pessimistic way. So you might say, oh, how can this day get any worse? And then something very small happens and you go, oh God, So it starts to color as if the whole day is out to get you, a rainy November day type of situation where, you're afraid to turn around in case you break the glass case worth €1,000 or whatever. So by contrast, then, starting with a small positive win, a calmer mindset, that can then become your buffer against later stress, right? There's a cringy saying, which is like, those cup cringy type sayings, which is win the morning, win the day. But there's kind of something to it. Our brains are very, very sensitive to how we start our day. On autopilot, we also miss opportunities for joy and for meaning. When we're just going through the motions, we might not notice, a beautiful scene, or we might tune out a family member, colleague, friend saying good morning, or not hear the care in their voice. We mightn't notice somebody's gotten up a little bit earlier to make us a cup of tea. Our emotional bandwidth can be narrower. So over time, this can contribute to, obviously, burnout, a sense of dullness. Reactive autopilot mornings are very, very costly, is where I'm going with this. They can drain our happiness, they can drain our productivity, and our ability to bounce back. I'm not mad on the term, but they erode at our resilience, essentially. They make it more difficult to feel okay when things aren't going our way. So what can we do about it? The good news is it's not, you don't have to stay in that reactive autopilot, slave to the context and environment that you're in. Absolutely not. You can change out of the default mode, to default note. So it is absolutely possible to train ourselves to start the day with more intention, right? Even if you're not a quote unquote morning person or your schedule is packed. So what does an intentional morning look like? Setting the tone for the rest of your day. So shifting from autopilot to intentional living in the morning doesn't mean you have to rewrite the script of your entire life, have everything sorted out, everything's in a jar with a label on it, or anything like that. It doesn't need to add time to your day. Small tweaks practiced consistently can really, really yield huge results. So the idea is to prime your brain and mood early on in the day so that you're in the driver's seat rather than being driven by those external demands and constantly being reactive. It's about responding instead of reacting. So Viktor Frankl, the famous psychiatrist, once noted, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. Right. Your stimulus, your response, and there's a little piece of space. The goal really is to make that space happen more often and just get a little bit broader each time. In the morning, we want to be able to find that space, right? A moment to breathe, a moment to choose, and to steer yourself in the direction that you would like to go. And remember, cognitive bias can happen on the inverse as well, right? If you prime your brain to start to look for evidence, it will do so for positive things as well as negative things. So many high performance coaches and researchers suggest that a morning ritual, however brief it might be, can act as a launch pad for a more intentional day. So Stanford neuroscientist Andrew Huberman, for example, emphasizes things like getting sunlight in the morning to set your brain's body clock, doing a little brief mindfulness or movement to boost your alertness. You don't have to start doing loads of different things. And if you're interested in just very, very simple morning routines, there's an awful lot of them out there. Huberman's one's very popular, especially with men. There's lots of different ones out there that suit your life. You don't have to start with an hour of fasted cardio and a cold shower and all these different things. You can if you want. They're scientifically proven to help, but start where you are at, right? Ultimately, an intentional morning is more about taking command of your attention and your mental state. You're not trying to delude yourself. You're not trying to lie to yourself. You're not trying to ignore problems. You're considering the fact that the brain responds to information it's given in very specific ways, and what you're doing is rebalancing, re-leveraging, no, we'll go with rebalancing the playing field, where basically that can work for you instead of against you. Because the other thing is, when it's working against you, you don't even know it's working against you. It's totally out of your awareness. So bring your awareness to it, can really anchor you back in. So here are a few simple things that you can do to start your day, transitioning from autopilot to intentional action. So take a beat, right? As you start. One of the simplest ways to break out of autopilot is actually to just pause, take a deep breath as soon as you can in the morning. If I did that first thing in the morning, I would probably just roll over and go back to sleep. But as soon as you're awake fully, so it sounds quite trivial, but the science on breathing is like airtight. Unintentional pun. Deep, slow breathing directly engages your parasympathetic nervous system, which is basically the part of your nervous system that calms the stress responses. It's like a reset button for your brain's alarm system. So research shows that even brief breathing exercise first thing in the day, come back to the center of yourself. People call it mindfulness, people call it meditation. Some people just call it taking a minute for themselves, whatever feels the best for you. When you wake up, before getting out of your bed or checking your phone, more importantly, try doing a single minute, 60 seconds of mindful breathing. So that could be as simple as inhaling slowly for 4 seconds, exhaling for 6, and repeat that a few different times. So there's also box breathing. Inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4, hold for 4. Or the physiological sigh that Huberman recommends, which is 2 quick inhales through the nose, 1 long exhale through the mouth. Actually, that calmed me right down straight away. The key is to breathe deeply and slowly. So as you do this, notice the sensation of the air and how your body feels. The more attention that you give your body, the more your parasympathetic nervous system is going to get activated. It's essentially sending a physiological message, that says it's okay, right? So starting your day from that is hugely beneficial. It's going to help your stress levels, it's going to help your cortisol, your heart rate, it's going to help your health overall. If you can do that after you've started the day, 2 or 3 times in your day, even better. So the other thing, which I always know to an Irish audience can sound a little bit fluffy, but is absolutely fantastic. leverage priming your mind with gratitude and positivity. So another powerful way to start intentionally is to set a positive mental note first thing in the morning. So remember, our brains have a natural bias. We remember problems more than things that went well. A technique to counteract that is gratitude practice and thinking of one or two things as you wake up that you're genuinely grateful for. So the more gratitude that you have flooding in your system first thing in the morning, the more your body is going to lower its stress hormone and boost your overall happiness. It's a nice, quick little shift to do. Now, the other thing is your brain doesn't know the difference between something you think about and something that's happening, right? So that's why anxiety is such a kicker, right? We'll think of something that makes us anxious, suddenly our body is starting to feel anxious. Leverage that, right? A lovely way to start the day, and I remember I did an experiment of this for about 4 months, and it really, really works. If you think of 3 things, 3 qualities in yourself that you'd like to embody for that day, right? They can be anything at all, right? I'll pick 3 there for my example. Calm, empathetic, focused, right? So three words, whatever they may be. Hilarious could be one of them. But whatever those 3 words are, try to think back how that feels. How does it feel to be calm? How does it feel to be focused? How does my mind move? My emotions move? How does my body feel in that? You're trying to give yourself as much sensory information as possible, because essentially what's going to happen is your brain is receiving a signal, you're giving it lots of information, and suddenly it's going to try to match it. So that's basically priming your system. So that's a very, very easy tool to start your day with. And reframing specific challenges, as I said, I'm not a fan of being delusional or not facing problems head on. But if there are specific curveballs there, specifically at work, things that you don't have a huge amount of power to directly impact, right? So you're left with feeling a little bit powerless around it. One of the best techniques to do this, to shift that and make yourself feel a little bit more in the driver's seat, is cognitive reframing. So choosing the story you tell yourself about what's happening, right? You can either say, I can't do anything about that. I feel terrible about it, this, that, and the other thing. Remember, your priming is going to start going, okay, I feel terrible. I can't do anything about it. It's going to start to send signals to feel powerless, to feel alone, to feel irritated, all these different things. So and tell the truth as well when you're reframing. It always helps. Tell the truth. Look for something that can change the way that you speak about yourself, the way that the meaning in it in there for you. If there's a way to shift that around where you feel more in control, you feel more at ease, you feel more at peace, even saying something like, yeah, I can't do anything about it, but on the plus side, I can't do anything about it. So there's no point in worrying about it. All these little shifts can really, really impact the course of your day. So crafting a better day, one morning at a time, very, very simply. The things that you do every single day, the way that you start your day, the way that you prime yourself matter hugely, have a huge, huge impact in your day. They will change your mood, your focus, your well-being, and how you show up with other people all day long. So I hope you guys found that helpful. I'm going to stop talking. If you guys have any questions or anything like that, I always love to hear from you. Otherwise, have a lovely rest of your week. I hope you find some nice little things to shift around throughout your day, and I will chat to you next week. Bye now.